Hello and welcome to this Astranti video. Today we are walking you through the ACCA SBL pre-scene for June 2025. So if you're an SBL student, this series is designed to be your ultimate guide. Now with the introduction of the pre-scene by ACCA, you're now expected to walk into the SBL exam already familiar with the company and the industry, as well as the key challenges it faces. But that's not enough. You also need to understand it strategically, commercially, and critically. And in this series, I'm going to take you through the pre-scene line by line. And we're going to highlight the most examinable content, decode what the examiner is really testing, and link every key insight back to the SBL syllabus and professional skills. So this is your chance to think like a strategic business leader before you even step into the exam room. Now, along the way through these videos, I'm going to show you how to identify potential exam issues as we're reading through them, how to think like a commercially aware manager, and how to turn the technical detail from this pre-scene into strategic insight. So let's think now about how these videos are actually structured. So just let me scroll down to the contents page. So what we're going to do for 3 videos in this series is do the walk by walk, but what I mean is line by line, really granular, detail obsessed analysis of the pre-scene. So that's videos 1, 2, and 3. In the final 2 videos, videos 4 and 5, obviously, we're going to have 2 really popular formats for our videos. The first one is going to be our strategic analysis video, where we take really popular models like SWOT and PESTEL and Porter's 5 forces and the value chain, and we feed all the information we've learned from the pre-scene through those models. And that's going to really strengthen your understanding of the pre-scene company and its environment. Then in the final video, video number 5, we look at the top 10 issues. So we take you through the 10 most likely issues that we think you're going to encounter in the exam. We're going to tell you why we think that, using our years of experience taking thousands of students through pre-scenes, and we're going to tie that back to the syllabus and points that you need to raise. So they're the final 2 videos. But in the first 3 videos, it's what we're going to concentrate on now. This is our walkthrough videos. So in video number 1, we are starting with the introduction, as you would imagine, and we're going to finish off just as we enter page number 5. So in video number 1, we're going to be exploring the Lucland shoe manufacturing industry. We're going to look at how shoes are produced, the key players in the market, the product types, the revenue split across retail, online, as well as the export channels. Then in video number 2, we're going to look from pages 5 to about 9, and that's where we really begin our deep dive into Dearn Shoes Limited, looking at its history, ownership, board structure, stakeholders, and project range. And then finally, pages 9 to 12 in our video 3. We are going to be looking at the manufacturing and sales processes, how well Dearn is using technology, the key risks, as well as a review of its website and final data tables. So as we go through line by line, we're going to be drawing out the relevant information, not just we're just reading through this document together, we're analyzing this document together, and I'm going to annotate and highlight, and I'm going to also refer you back to relevant elements of the syllabus, talk about any relevant kind of exam questions that may stem from certain areas, and hopefully give you a really comprehensive overview of everything that you need to know to go into your SBL case study pre-scene exam. If I've got that the right way around, it's a bit of a tongue twister. Fully prepared and fully confident so you can get the best marks that you possibly can. But really the best way to show you what to do, or what we're gonna do, is actually just get cracking. and get you to start thinking and training like a strategic leader. So let's scroll down now to see what we're going to come across first in this pre-scene. And as I already touched upon on the contents page, we're going to start off with a very short introduction, and I'm going to leave it there to give myself a bit of blank space to annotate alongside. Now, it's a very short opening paragraph, but it does give us the first impression of Dearn Shoes Limited. So we find out that it's nearly a century old, and that makes it a heritage brand with a strong domestic presence. Now, we can see that it's the fourth largest brand or shoe manufacturer in Lucland, and that tells us that it's a significant company, but it's not dominant. So that suggests that it's large enough to matter, but small enough to face pressure from stronger or faster competitors. Now we can also see, if I can highlight my highlighter here, is that it's based in Lucland, obviously, and Lucland is developed and politically stable country, and that really implies a relatively low-risk home market, and that could impact the board's risk appetite possibly, as well as its strategic decisions. Now, this is a relatively short paragraph, but just to show you how things are going to work through these videos, you can see I've put on something there, C1A, which is of course a syllabus link. And we've got a syllabus link here talking about explaining the importance of strategy within organizational context. So what we're seeing with this paragraph alone, this small paragraph, is introducing a company that's operating within a specific competitive context. And so you, as a student, should be able to recognize how strategic importance is shaped by market positioning and longevity. Okay. So there we go, there's our introductory paragraph, and this is kind of the format that we're going to be following as we go through these three videos. We're not summarizing, we're not reading through, we're analyzing and hopefully drawing out the key points and directing you to places you may need to go back to the syllabus to just brush up and make sure you're particularly strong in those areas. So let's scroll down now to section number 2, which is shoe manufacturing and retailing industry in Lucland. So we're not dealing with Dearn yet, we're dealing with the broader industry in Lucland. What we're seeing in this first paragraph is the introduction of the idea or the basic structure of the shoe industry in Lucland. It highlights that companies operate through two main sales channels. So either directly to customers via retail or online stores, or indirectly to customers via distributors to other countries. Now what we're seeing here is a kind of hint, the first kind of hint, and we're going to pick up on this theme as we go through these videos, is it's maybe limited international reach. Maybe there's limited digital expansion, and that's setting us up for future strategic opportunities. Now we've only just started and we're already starting to pull out, okay, here's some ideas where we might be able to improve things. Here's some ideas where may be challenges for Dearn. So we found out in this opening paragraph that adults and children's shoes are produced in workshops or factories. And when we're thinking about the syllabus linked to this kind of area, we're thinking about analysing customers and their markets, and that includes market segmentation. So really got to make sure you understand how businesses segment customers geographically. So what we've just drawn out here is the kind of the domestic ideal versus export, and also by channel. And what we've seen here is kind of retail versus online. And that's really important for strategic positioning. But let's move down now to our next paragraph, which is looking at the kind of material trends in the shoe manufacturing industry. And what we see in this paragraph is that there's been a long-term shift in manufacturing inputs from the traditional leather, which I'm sure we can all imagine kind of some shoesmith using in some kind of hand workshop, to a cheaper synthetic alternative like plastic-based faux leather. So what this transition reflects is both cost efficiency and the evolution of supply chain materials. And it also introduces potential reputational and environmental concerns, which are going to become especially relevant later in this pre-scene. Now, something else I've just popped on screen is a professional skill. That's something else we're also going to annotate from time to time. And the professional skill I've highlighted here, or annotated here, I should say, is skepticism. Because in this instance, students, shouldn't just question the efficiency of man-made materials, but also their long-term impact and whether they're actually going to align with Dearn's brand values or customer expectation or even kind of trends in usage. So what we're seeing here already is some ideas of things that may come up in exams, like maybe there's going to be questions on sustainability or ethical sourcing or product development strategy. Now, in the real world recently, there has been a lot more focus on sustainability in the kind of sneaker industry. You've seen the very quick proliferation of the Vega brand, which really prides itself on sustainability, and they've really been able to capture a large part of the market very, very quickly. So that's something that we need to bear in mind when we are looking at ideas of sustainability, although of course for the ACCA SBL exam you don't need to bring in other real world companies as examples. Now the next paragraph concerns industry growth figures. So again, it's a really short paragraph. This is all very much introductory and an overview, but it does give us a key indicator of the industry strategic context. We find out that it is mature and slowing. Now, the historical average growth of 1.71% has dropped to a forecast of just 1.06%, and that signals limited organic growth potential. Now, this is going to affect Dearn's ability to grow revenue unless it can take market share, innovate, or expand into new markets. So I've just flagged something else on the screen as well. It's another syllabus link, and that's about the kind of an evaluation or analysis of the macro environment. It's a syllabus link using models like Pestel, because of course economic slowdown is a macroeconomic factor that directly shapes strategic options, pricing pressure, and consumer behavior. Now, another reason why I flagged the model Pestel is because we will be feeding all this information into our Pestel model in our video 4, so be sure to check that out. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit more now, just to try and give ourselves a little bit of space, because before I want to move on, I want you just to pause for a second and think, well, let's imagine you're a company and you're trying to grow in a market that's forecast to expand by just 1% per year. What would your options be? Organic growth might not just cut it. So what would you begin to look at instead? Now, these are the sort of things you should start to be thinking about as we work through these ideas and these points, and we highlight kind of what's going on in Lucland and with Dearn themselves. Now, again, it's something else we talk about in the strategic analysis video. We say, okay, what are our different avenues for growth? These are possibilities. Okay. So hopefully you've taken a moment to pause and think about that. Let me just scroll back a little further down now, just to get a bit more white on screen that we can fill out with red and highlighting. And we're moving on to a paragraph now on market dominance and structure. And we can see here basically the competitive structure of Lucland, if I just have my marker there, of Lucland's shoe industry. Now we've got our 5 leading manufacturers, which includes us, it includes Dearn. We all together, all 5 of us, hold over 45% of the market. And that means that more than half is controlled by over 200 smaller players. So as my annotation shows, this points to a fragmented, highly competitive environment. So Dearn is facing pressure not just from big rivals, but from agile, possibly niche-focused smaller brands. So market share battles are likely to be fierce. And if we just think about that Veja example I've just used, they were very small, and now all of a sudden you see the shops popping up all over the place, people wearing their shoes. They were this kind of smaller player that are suddenly bursting through onto the scene. Now again, it's something that we're going to be looking at in the strategic analysis video, where we feed all this kind of information through Porter's 5 forces. So what we're seeing with this fragmentation just suggests a really high competitive rivalry and obviously low barriers to entry. And that really should make you think about the impact that this will have on pricing and innovation and brand differentiation. Now, obviously, this could be really linked to a task you may have to complete on competitive strategy or market consolidation, perhaps being asked to assess Dearn's position relative to competitors or evaluate acquisition or collaboration options. But again, these are the kinds of topics that we will talk about in the top 10 videos. So let's move on now and start thinking about production methods. And basically what we find out here is the industry in Lucland is clearly segmented by production method. You've got mass production techniques, if I highlight that, or they are handcrafted. Now, this distinction isn't just operational, it represents two different market strategies. So, on one hand, as you'd expect, mass production enables scale and affordability, whilst handcrafted offers exclusivity, higher pricing, and often more ethical or artisanal appeal. Now, Dearn, as we find out later on, operates in both spaces. But along with the kind of benefits, this does introduce complexity in supply chain, branding, and customer targeting. Okay, so what do we learn about mass production? Well, obviously, mass production relies heavily on machines. And in this instance, machines are used at nearly all stages of the process. But interestingly, human supervision or kind of human oversight maybe is still essential. And that suggests to us that Dearn or any of its competitors can't fully automate production. And obviously this has cost and capacity implications. Now, in an industry where scale matters, the extent of automation could affect competitive advantage, responsiveness, and margins. And it also sets up a really interesting contrast with handcrafted production, where labor intensity is, of course, far higher. Okay, let's drop down now to our page number 3. We can see the kind of 4-step shoe manufacturing process. What we're seeing here is basically a visual summary that outlines the 4 core stages in all shoe production methods. We've got cutting and then stitching and lasting and finishing. Now, despite the differences in scale and labor intensity between mass production and handcrafting, the underlying process is basically the same. So this suggests opportunities for shared training, standardization, and process improvement, regardless of the production model. But let's scroll down now and have a look at the offshoring trend. I'll leave that out there so I've got some white. So what we're seeing here is basically a structural shift in the industry. So once it was fully domestic, but Lucland's shoe manufacturing has increasingly turned to third-party production in lower-cost countries. And this isn't a fringe practice. It's now a standard cost-saving measure, and it really reflects the globalization of manufacturing and creates a growing strategic divide between the domestic production, which is often handcrafted, compared to outsourced mass production. Now, for Dearn, as we find out later on, which retains some domestic manufacturing, this does raise questions about cost, control, ethics, and brand identity. Now, of course, we are talking about the wider industry as a whole at the moment, but as we go on to look at Dearn, then obviously this kind of idea, this kind of topic is highly examinable as part of a make or buy decision, as part of evaluation or ethical scenario, and obviously it could form the basis of a task, evaluating whether Dearn should expand offshore production, or maybe they should choose to switch suppliers or invest more locally. Now, it's interesting to see this is more widespread through the industry than it just being about Dearn, but that's certainly something that may come up. Okay, let's go down a bit more to handcrafting. So this kind of paragraph is focused really, or emphasizes that handcraft shoes are obviously kind of high end. They're involving manual labor throughout the stages, especially in certain tasks like in stitching the upper. And obviously what we're seeing here is a contrast with the machine-based mass production model, and obviously really is emphasizing the importance of skilled human input. And obviously what we're seeing here is an implication of quality and skilled labor. So that's talking about labor costs really, and longer production times, and greater emphasis on training and skill sets and employee retention, and obviously also sold at a higher price. And obviously one thing that comes to mind when we're talking about this, and when we're thinking about the syllabus link in C3C, it's about applying Porter's value chain. And obviously what we're seeing with these handcrafting is that the craftsmanship element adds value in the operations and service stages of the value chain. And by doing so, it differentiates the product. And leading on from that, and obviously referring to something I mentioned just before the Porter's value chain point, is that we're seeing handcrafted shoes are made from hand quality leather, and because of that and the training and the skills that we mentioned, they sell at significantly higher prices because of the labor input and the materials. So what we're seeing here is they are being positioned in the premium or a luxury segment. Now, if we're thinking about Dearn, and I know we've not properly introduced ourselves to Dearn yet, or introduced Dearn to us, but this would create opportunities for brand elevation, exports, and reputation building. But also, of course, there is a factor where it would limit mass market scalability, because you simply couldn't, create the demand for these exclusive shoes, and then probably also meet the demand if you could create it. And before moving on, if we want to think about another professional skill, I put commercial acumen up on screen. I'll highlight it there for you. Now, obviously, I put understanding the margin, value relationship in niche products. And so when we're thinking about handcrafting or mass market, there may be some kind of thought where you think, well, we've got to think about Dearn's infrastructure and branding support, whether it should actually warrant any investment in this line. And again, the exam relevance may come from scenarios involving investment decisions or product portfolio planning or luxury market entry. Now, something we can note in this paragraph here, small paragraph, but what we get is a confirmation that handcrafted shoes are still entirely made in Lucland. And of course, what we saw earlier was that mass-produced shoes are likely outsourced. And again, what we're seeing here is this kind of reinforcement of authenticity and local craftsmanship of this product line. And of course, that in turn has implications for branding, pricing, CSR, and customer loyalty, especially as ethical and national pride themes run strongly in Lucland's consumer base. Okay, and just along from there, I put a syllabus link. talking really about the idea of domestic production and how it can tap into consumer trends around ethical sourcing, which we're going to come onto a lot more later, nationalism, and this kind of environmental concern that, again, is a relatively big feature of this pre-scene, as we will see when we come on a little bit more to Dearn themselves. And maybe something for consideration is whether Dearn should produce local items and in order to give themselves a competitive advantage in terms of branding. But we're coming to the end of these two types of production, the end of the production section. You can see we're moving on to the types of shoe in a second. But before we move on, I wanted to kind of put down three key takeaways from this section on how shoes are made in Lucland. And hopefully you can see them. I was trying to squeeze them in on the bit of white remaining. And the three takeaways really. Number one, the industry splits between mass production and handcrafting, and each with very different costs, labour and branding implications. Number two, handcrafted shoes are still made in Lucland, and that supports premium positioning and ethical appeal. And number three, offshoring of mass production is now standard, and that raises questions about cost versus control. So hopefully now we've got an understanding of how shoes are produced in Lucland. Let's take a look at what kinds of shoes are being made and for whom they are being made. So let's scroll down a little bit and see if I can get a bit more white on screen for you. So I'll operate between the types of shoes and the market structure. And the first type of shoe are formal shoes, and they really represent the premium handcrafted segment across the Lucland shoe industry. They're made from leather, they're aimed at adult customers, and they're typically associated with high quality and traditional craftsmanship. And as we mentioned earlier on, they're going to be commanding high margins, reinforcing traditional brand values, and supporting export potential where luxury and craftsmanship are valued. And very much when I'm thinking of formal shoes, I'm thinking of those old wooden shoe lasts that you kind of get made up of your feet and the shoes are built around, or the types of shoes you wear to your wedding or to funerals or to very special events, and so people are willing to spend more money on them. And really these are likely to, or the idea of types of shoes and what they represent are really likely to appear in exam-based questions on what should we focus on in terms of our strategy, how should we present ourselves in terms of branding, or is there an opportunity for global niche market expansion? Okay, our semi-formal shoes are kind of a bit of a mix. They're kind of mass-produced, but they do have that kind of premium material. So they've got leather and synthetic materials. And so they likely sit in this kind of mid-price segment and aim to balance quality with affordability. Unlike the formal shoes, which we really associated with luxury, these are, in a more accessible price point. Now, this line would help Dearn, we haven't got to Dearn yet, but just as an example, really serve a much broader customer base, but it could be vulnerable to cost pressure and mid-market erosion. Now, I've put a syllabus link on screen under this because really we're talking about mid-range products, and mid-range products often face pressure from either side of them. So they face pressure from the premium end as well as the budget competitors. And obviously we know that we are operating within a competitive market as is, with hundreds of competitors. So obviously that's something that's going to be quite important for us. And the third type of adult shoe is the casual shoe. So this shoe, or this line, is all about making sure that another market's being targeted, the kind of cost-conscious budget informal market. Now these types of shoes are fully mass-produced and using fully synthetic materials. So it's probably got lower margins, but could deliver high volume. Now, some companies in the industry struggle to engage younger customers in this segment, as we'll find out, especially the 18 to 30 demographic, who could be more brand conscious or trend driven. So a syllabus link aligned with that is C3B, analysing customers and markets, including market segmentation. So really trying to get an understanding of how to serve these younger, difficult demographic who are more trend sensitive customers in order to be able to target them. And then finally we have our children's shoes. Now what we see with the children's shoes are that they are also mass produced, but they do use a mix of materials, so leather and synthetic. Now this kind of segment, when you're thinking about the industry as a whole, often prioritizes practicality, affordability, durability, and we also see that many brands support these offerings with fitting services or sizing support. So I've got a small daughter, and we take her in to get her shoes fitted because obviously her feet have grown a lot more quickly than ours do. So we're settled now. We know our shoe sizes. Her feet are growing all the time, and we have to go in and get them checked. And obviously, this helps build relationships with us. We have certain shops we like going in because they fit really well. We know we can trust them. And actually, my daughter likes going into certain shops because she gets her shoes fitted and they speak nicely to her. So actually what we're seeing is a kind of reinforcement of customer loyalty from a young age, because it's not just shoes, it's a service attached to it. And because of that extra service, I've just stuck up another syllabus link, and that's talking about Porter's value chain. So talking about services like the fitting support can really enhance the customer experience and add post-sale value. And again, we will come to, I'm not sure we talked about the value chain here already, in fact. We will come to the value chain in the strategic analysis video, which is video number 4. Okay, so we've come to the end of the types of shoe, the product types section. So again, there's not so much to summarize here, but let's just very quickly do what we did before because we have got the space. Well, I said we had space, we could just about fit it in. The first point I'd like to make is a very simple one, that Lucland's shoe market covers 4 clear product types: the formal, the semi-formal, the casual, and the children's. Each of these lines serves a different customer segment, and it also serves different price points. But we also see that each of these comes with its own cost structure and brand implications. And finally, we see the casual segment is price sensitive and competitive, but the formal and children's shoes often support differentiation or loyalty. Okay, so now let's explore who's actually making and selling these shoes and how the market is divided up. And we can see, can I get all 5 of the big companies on screen? I can just about, but I might scroll up to give myself a bit of white in a second. So what we're seeing here is a table that breaks down the structure of the Lucland shoe industry between the large and the small players. And obviously this feeds on from what we were talking about earlier about fragmentation and dominance by a handful of major firms. Now what we got to do here is make sure that we really understand the market share percentages, the revenue comparisons and channels focus, because these figures can really reveal who holds the competitive advantage and where the growth opportunities lie. Now I'm not going to put a syllabus link up on the screen at the moment, but all this could kind of draw me back to an evaluation of the source of competition in an industry like using Porter's 5 forces. Now we've already talked about this kind of industry concentration directly affecting competitive rivalry and shaping strategy, so I won't put that on screen. So what I've chosen to do instead of doing that, is just to kind of put some on screen talking about the exam relevance. So obviously this kind of information can support tasks that involve benchmarking, competitive strategy or growth projections, because you may be asked to evaluate market gaps, for example, or recommend how a company should respond to market dominance. Because remember, although we're one of the bigger organizations, we're not the biggest. So there is going to be competitive pressure on us. Okay, so what we do now is have a look at the summary of analysis of each organization, and we'll start with Rego. So we can see their production method is mass production. They target that very difficult age range that we were talking about, the 18 to 30-year-olds. The product focus is the casual shoes. You'd probably expect with that type of demographic. The price point is high, and the market share in Lucland is 11.1%. Now, I put a summary up here for Rego. Premium position, despite being mass produced. To benchmark for youth engagement. So I guess if we're thinking about kind of real world relations, these are kind of trainers, you know, very fashionable trainers. They're casual shoes, but they cost a lot, even though they don't cost that much to make because they're made abroad. These are mass produced, but they're targeting a younger market. Now, I've also put on screen over on the right hand side, if I can find my marker, it's gone missing. There we go. On the right-hand side is the notes related to Flamingo. Now, they're the largest low-cost player. So we can see again, they're mass-produced. They're low quality as opposed to Rego's good quality. But they're casual shoes and children's shoes. So obviously they're aimed at adults and children. And the price point is low. And they've captured 10.8% of the Lucland market in 20x4. So they're the largest low-cost player. Really broad target segments. And they've got this kind of budget low-end positioning. And obviously to make that work, they've got to sell a lot. So luckily for them, they are the largest low-cost player. Then we come to Dearn. So obviously that is us, and interestingly, we are the only ones that do a bit of both, the handcrafting and mass production, as we spoke about earlier on. We have got good quality, and because of the way we produce, we actually offer all 4 types of shoes. And obviously, that means we're aiming at adults and children. And we are medium in our price point. We've got 9.4% of the market. So we're actually the third. I think I said fourth just now, but we're the third largest organization. So we're a versatile producer because we offer different types of production, which means we can offer the 4 types of shoe. But we are a medium tier price point. And that means it's very difficult for us, well, maybe I should say that our pricing is limited in what we can charge and the market we can reach. Now, I think when I've been reading through this pre-scene, if you're UK based, you might know the retailer Clarks. There's quite a lot of similarities with Clarks. Good quality, make everyone knows about them. But they're not super fashionable, so they can't get the high price point like Rego can. And because they're cheap, they can't quite get the share that someone like Flamingo can. Okay, then we can go down to Parish. Now, Parish are the only ones that... I've just lost my marker again, pardon me. Hopefully you can read along from Parish. Here we go. Parish are the only shoe company that only offer the handcrafting production method. They focus solely on adults. They focus solely on formal shoes. They're really good quality. And as you'd imagine, they've got a high price point. So premium niche player. And they're niche because they're only offering one type of shoe to one of our market segments. And likely their brand is built on tradition and artisanal skills and the craft that they offer. So I suppose you're kind of thinking really more of a Savile Row shoe, you know, something that's made in a very specific area and famed for it, or probably an upmarket high street brand like Russell or Bromley, something like that. Okay, then we can drop down to our fourth one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, our fifth one. Better Buy. And they have a mid-market position. They offer adults and children's shoes, semi-formal and children's, I should say. They're mass-produced. They're a medium price point like us, so that kind of the risk from the pressure of the competitive pressure from the high end and the budget offerings. And we might see that they really lack kind of clear focus or specialism. And then we've got our smaller organizations, which have over 54.7% of the market. And obviously, because we're dealing with kind of over 200 organizations there, they're offering handcrafted and mass-produced, adults and children, all 4 types of shoes. And obviously, highly fragmented, And there's probably kind of regional or niche strengths for different brands. And I use that word fragmented. And really what I think this table suggests is, or shows us or reinforces, is the fragmented nature of the market, and really provides key context for kind of understanding Dearn's position against its rivals. So really, when I'm looking at a table like this, I'm thinking that you should be focusing on competitive positioning, pricing strategies, customer targeting, and how production methods align with product strategy. Now, before we move on, when we're thinking about the major companies, I think we can probably see that each company has carved out a different position. One focusing on price, another on product type, another on age group. And what this brings to mind, and something we're going to cover in the strategic analysis video, of course, is Porter's generic strategies. So what we can see here is that some organizations like Flamingo have gone for cost leadership, and others like Parrish have gone for differentiation. So before we move on, just take a moment and see if you can think, just thinking about Porter's generic strategy, which firm is stuck in the middle. And then that question may help us later in a later video talking about strategic clarity or risk. Okay, so before we move on, I just want to leave us with 3 key things to take away from the market breakdown. I'm just finding a space to pop them in. So my 3 key takeaways here are, said it once, said it twice, said it a third time. The market is really fragmented. Over 50% of the share is held by over 200 small organizations. Only a few of the big players really hold a significant share, but each is focusing on a different combination of product, customer, and price point. And Dearn, we're going to talk about us obviously much more in the next video, it won't be this video. Dearn is operating a hybrid model, but isn't the biggest or the most niche. So there we go, that's the competitive landscape. Now we can see how are the shoes actually sold to customers. Oh, got a nice sort of white space as well. Okay, so we can see here that 85% of the revenue earned by Lucland's shoe manufacturers come from sales made in Lucland. So what we're seeing here is a strong domestic resilience. Now the fact that 60% of all revenue is from physical retail stores suggests the industry is still really kind of old-fashioned, or could I say offline heavy. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It could represent a strength in terms of customer service or brand control, or it could suggest a weakness, which is obviously the lack of digital transformation. Now, one of the things that suggests to me in the exam is you could talk about, you could be tested upon Dearn being over-reliant on its physical stores, or perhaps discussing strategies for digital transformation. But again, this is something we will talk about in our top 10 issues video. However, as you would expect, online revenue has been growing steadily. It has to, surely, and now it does make up 25% of the total revenue, which is $926 million. But no online sales are exported. Deliveries are only made to Lucland addresses. So what we're seeing here is a clear missed opportunity in international e-commerce, and could really create a competitive gap for companies more digitally agile. Now the syllabus link I put on screen is C3F, looking at how developments in tech really affect customer behavior and organizational response. There's quite a lot you can get stemming from this, but we'll focus on it more when we come to Dearn themselves. But when you think about professional skills as well, about evaluation, look at the opportunities and the limitations of current e-commerce models, I certainly think that will be featuring in our SWOT analysis when we do it in our strategic analysis video, that no sales are made abroad. And obviously we could carry on with what we were just talking about, that kind of exam task, think about digital expansion and international strategy or logistics investment. Now, one of the strange things that's kind of aligned with the lack of international sales is that actually, historically, Lucland itself is known for having an amazing reputation for the quality of its products. And so, for many years, the Lucland manufactured shoes have been exported. But in recent years, manufacturers of the handcrafted shoes have seen the increasing demand for their products. However, you may think, okay, there might be a reason why the organizations, that do have kind of the websites don't make international sales is because, no one wants to buy Lucland's shoes. But actually, the Lucland industry's got an amazing international reputation for having really well-made products. And so, for many years, Lucland manufactured shoes have been exported, I should say a proportion of them. And in recent years, it's the handcrafted shoes that have seen an increasing demand for their products from markets where countries' economies are relatively strong and their citizens have high levels of disposable income. And we can see, in fact, that export sales make up 15% of industry revenue. And these really are for the handcrafted shoes, which are sold via distributors. So we're seeing really strong international demand for the kind of premium craftsmanship that we've been talking about associated with these kind of formal shoes. And we see this especially, as I've already mentioned, in countries that have got a strong economy. But what we do see in this paragraph is the current model is relying, if I've lost my marker again, here we go, is relying on distributors. So these are indirect sales being sold via distributors. And of course, that could limit pricing control, could really limit brand presence overseas as well. Now, actually, this really raises a kind of great ethical and strategic consideration. Is relying on third-party distributors a short-term win at the cost of long-term brand control? Now, in your exam, you need to show your commercial acumen, you need to show your professional judgment, and so actually you might suggest building direct export channels, but obviously making sure the correct infrastructure is in place and you're exporting to the right markets that kind of have that high levels of disposable income we've been talking about, so the investment you'd have to make would be justified. So what we're seeing here really is that export trends represent a really good opportunity. There's demand growth, but there's also risk in indirect access and the dependence on the distributors. And obviously one of the key tasks coming out of this was you might have to look at strategic growth options or on-market development tasks. Okay, so that's our sales channels. Before we move on, let's take a few seconds to think about this and think about why is it that this industry hasn't embraced online export delivery yet? Could there be barriers in place that are stopping them? Well, there could be several, couldn't there? There could be logistics and cross-border fulfillment that's really expensive or complex. There could be legal or tax limitations, or it could just be that the companies don't have the digital infrastructure to support this international e-commerce that we're talking about. But whatever the reason, it really does seem to be a strategic blind spot, especially when we do know there is international demand for Lucland's handcrafted products. And it does seem kind of a bit of a flag that's coming from this pre-scene, that there's a big gap here that's certainly worth being prepared for as you go into your exams. Okay, we got a time for one more diagram in this video before we move, or before we stop, I should say, and move on to video 2. And so basically what we're seeing in this chart is a confirmation of the breakdown of revenue sources that we talked about earlier on. So we've got 60% offline sales in Lucland, 25% is online, but Lucland only, and 15% are the exports that we've talked about. So hopefully what you see with this picture is a really easy way to grasp the industry's heavy dependence on the domestic market. Only a tiny proportion of international revenue and no online export delivery. It really reinforces the strategic need to consider digital expansion and global reach. Now, obviously, this has linked on to what we've already been speaking about, but obviously in the exam, these kind of charts can save you a huge amount of time because it's really showing what we just saw, but really quickly. But of course, this is only if you know what to look for. It's not about describing this chart. Instead, what we're doing is asking, what does this chart mean strategically? What we're seeing here is it means the industry is still anchored in physical sales, and that is a potential weakness or risk. Okay, so to close this section on sales, and indeed to close this video, I've put the 3 big takeaways from this section on screen. Number 1, still really reliant on physical store sales, which I suppose links into the fact that these products, have to be fitted. There isn't, I'm always buying shoes online at the moment, and they never ever seem to fit. So I think it's probably an industry problem that they've got to get around. Number 2, we know online is growing, but that is only within Lucland. There's no international delivery, and we know that export revenue is really tiny, and it seems to be focused just on the kind of expensive, premium, handcrafted, traditional shoes, and they are sold primarily through third-party distributors. So with that, hopefully you've got a solid understanding of the Lucland shoe industry. In video 2, we're going to carry on. You can see that the next title on screen is Challenges Within the Industry, but then we are going to move in and focus on Dearn Shoes itself. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in video 2. Okay, and one more thing before we move on. I've mentioned the videos in this series and videos 4 and 5, the strategic analysis in the top 10, but I haven't mentioned a whole host of other exam tools that are going to help get you ready to smash your SBL exams. The first thing we've got on screen, as you can see, is a free industry analysis. It's going to tell you everything that you need to know about your industry. And then we have obviously got the pre-scene analysis. That's the 3 videos where we walk you and talk you through the pre-scene. Then we've got the videos 4 and 5, which I've been mentioning throughout the videos. That is, of course, the strategic analysis video where we take all the information and we feed it through really popular models and tools. So you've got all that strategic information at your fingertips for the SBL. And in the top 10, we use our years of experience of getting students through case studies exams and highlight to you the top 10 issues that we think you're going to face when you sit in that exam room. Then, of course, you need to practice. So we've got 2 pre-scene based mock exams for you to test your skills on, as well as an exam technique mini course, and of course our live and recorded masterclasses. So everything that you need to do very well in your SBL exams.